right, good morning and welcome to another monthly coaching call for the HIV Continuum of Care Collaborative. My name is Christina Clark and I am the Collaborative Project Director for the HIV Continuum of Care Collaborative. This is led by the BC Centre for Excellence in HIV/AIDS and made possible by the hard work and passion of all health authorities and many community groups across BC. I'm very happy to be facilitating this 8th monthly coaching call in a series of 12 coaching calls that will occur from now until January of 2015. The purpose of these calls is to provide all collaborative participants with a space to share good ideas, find support through challenges, and to connect with others to further our shared aims. First and foremost, these calls are meant to be relevant and useful, so we hope that you'll speak up to share your own ideas, including challenges and questions you might have. In today's call, we'll be focusing on tapping into the most underutilized resource in healthcare, and that's the patient. So what can be done to learn from patients and empower them to learn and manage their own care? What are some leading practices and philosophies that are important to meaningfully connect with patients to support our quality goals and health outcome goals? In this call, I'll spend about 10 minutes setting the stage with a brief primer on why the patient is such a valuable resource, and I'll share you a story. I'll then turn it over to Julie Killey, who will lead the next segment, and we'll be joined by colleagues Glenn Bradford, Neil Fowler, Carol Kelman, Jen Messina, and Mary Petty. An additional 15 minutes is set aside for questions and discussions, and a final 5 minutes to update on some key dates for the coming months. So I'm really thrilled to be joined today by the following speakers, including Glenn Bradford, Peer Navigation Coordinator at Positive Living BC, Neil Fowler, Program Assistant at IDC, Carol Kelman, Aboriginal Nurse Practice Lead at IDC, Julie Killey, Operations Leader at IDC, Jen Messina, Dietitian working at IDC, and Mary Petty, Social Worker at IDC. So these individuals have a wealth of knowledge, and I encourage everyone to join the dialogue by asking questions and offering contributions throughout the call. I see that there's a lot of people also on the call with a wealth of knowledge, including a number of people who would identify as that community or patient role. So I'm encouraging everyone to really join the dialogue, and you can do so by either A, raising your hand. So there's a little button at the top of your screen where there's a little guy that looks like he's raising his hand. So you can do that and we'll know that you have something to say and we can unmute you easily. You can also throughout, and I encourage you to do this, use the chat box to log any comments or questions you may have throughout the conversation. So let's get started. I'm going to start by introducing you to ePatient Dave. ePatient Dave, or Dave DeBroncard, is pretty well known as an advocate for participatory medicine, and this is why. When Dave was 56, he received a life-changing diagnosis. He went into his physician's office for his regular physical, and his only real complaint was that he had some pain in his shoulder. Now, his shoulder turned out to be fine, but they discovered a shadow in his lung. And after a series of tests, he received a devastating diagnosis. And that was stage 4 renal cell carcinoma or kidney cancer. He was given only a median survival time of 24 weeks. Now, Dave's physician gave him a few treatment options and also prescribed, as Dave says, an online information and patient support community. Of course, Dave being an early adopter of the internet and all things informational, he went directly there to find out as much as he could. He found out that his was a rare type of cancer, so it was best to get to a specialist center. Also, treatment outcomes were bleak, but that there was this one type of treatment that was a long shot, and so not usually talked about, but in some cases had been found to be successful. Dave's next steps were to seek out a specialist center. He started on a clinical trial, high-dose treatment, which ultimately shrank his tumors over a couple of years. 7 years after his diagnosis, he's now considered to be cancer-free and continues to work actively on promoting participatory medicine and the e-patient movement to make sure patients are equipped, enabled, engaged, and empowered to get involved in their own care and treatment. So what makes the patient such a valuable resource? And, before I continue, I'm going to ask everyone to answer this question in their own thoughts in the chat box. Why do you think the patient makes such a valuable resource?
Maybe a unique perspective?
Unique perspective, absolutely. What else? What are your thoughts for what makes the patient such a valuable resource to the care team? All right, we have a few typing in. So the lived experience, absolutely. That can't substitute for anything else. Everyone is an expert in their own care and their own body, and that can't be replicated. Personal experience and understanding of their own body, exactly. They're the expert when it comes to their own health needs. Totally agree. Personalization, that's interesting. It's another great contribution. Honesty. So I'm going to encourage everyone to keep typing in, and I'm going to follow up along with Dave's story. So as Dave puts it, the patients want to help. And in his really moving TEDx video, Dave describes his experience and recalls wondering what his mom's face might look like at his own funeral. He says, if you ever wonder why patients are motivated and want to help, think about that. So of course we know that emotional state, stress, and social determinants have a profound impact on health-seeking behavior, health outcomes, and cost to system. So here's another thing to think about. Does anyone know the significance of the number that's on the screen right now? Any ideas what 4,800 signifies? No ideas. All right, so I will tell you, this number signifies the number of waking hours each person may have in a given year. So this is the number for a person living with a lifelong illness that a patient will have to make decisions or not to manage their own condition. Now contrast that to the time that same person spends in the care system. Say a person living with HIV has, let's say, 10 visits in the year with different care providers, spends 30 minutes at each visit. That's about 5 hours. And if we say add in an additional 10-hour hospital visit in that same year, that accounts for only 0.3% of their entire wakeful time in the year. So as care providers and as a system, if we're to maximize our impact in that small proportion of time that we interact with an individual, we have to make sure we're thinking about how, firstly, we work to equip patients to manage their care and treatment. An equipped patient has the tools to manage their condition, and this might be access to information and peers to better understand their condition and treatment options. 2, how do we enable patients to manage their care and treatment and engage in health-seeking behavior? This is about connecting patients with the basic resources they need to be able to make decisions and become full participants in their care. This might mean facilitating connections for income support, perhaps offering meal services, and bus tickets to be able to access care. Engage. How do we help to engage patients? To be engaged, as Dave quotes, to be engaged is to be involved, active, and responding. An engaged patient listens, responds, asks questions, thinks for herself, and acts. A disengaged patient treats healthcare like a car wash, sort of rolls up the window, sits back, and gets things sprayed on him. So this is the quote from Dave Bronkart in his book, Let the Patient Help. How do we help to empower patients? Give patients resources and information to develop a sense of knowledge and agency. An empowered person knows what she or he wants and speaks up. A disempowered person, however, faced with a challenge will say, there's nothing I can do about it. And that's the hallmark of being powerless. Facing the same challenge, an empowered person thinks, what can I do? So with that simple framework in mind, I'm going to turn it over to Julie, who will share some of their organizational philosophies and programs that function and help to equip, enable, engage, and empower clients.
So part of the strategic plan at Providence, which is what IDC is a part of, is the care experience. So we define this at Providence by stating that we will have person and family-centered care as our approach to the planning, delivery, and evaluation of health care that is grounded in mutually beneficial partnerships among healthcare providers, the people we serve, and their families. So we've taken this in IDC where we've tried to tailor our services to ensure that patients receive culturally safe, socially just, low-barrier services. And this is partly because we've seen a real change in our population over the last 10 years or so. We really started off as a place where people were just coming to see the doctor. They came to get medications and there was not a lot of other support. There was, one social worker and one nurse at that time. And we've since really grown into an interdisciplinary team that really seeks to sort of create a safe place for patients where they're sort of surrounded by the things they need rather than them having to go out and seek them elsewhere. So we kind of have this approach that is more of like, I guess just more, encompassing the patient rather than the patient having to go to a whole bunch of other places to get services. So one of the ways that we've tried to make IDC a safe and welcoming place for people starts with the first visit. So on the first visit, we have an hour-long appointment, which is where the nurse takes the patient around and actually just familiarizes them with the space. So introduces them to the staff. So goes and introduces them to the front desk staff, kind of shows them around the clinic, talks to them about, what their hopes are for their future visits, and sort of assesses where they're at right now. So that first visit is really almost like a getting to know you visit rather than just getting right into the medical, seeing the physician. We do try to have that visit that the patient starts to understand that, this is something that you can be a part of. We want you to have opinions about your care right from day one, and we want to make you feel welcome and safe here. Some of the other things that we've done, and actually when we had Accreditation Canada come through, they did mention that the IDC was a very welcoming space. So they said there wasn't a lot of stop signs everywhere, which in healthcare I don't know if anyone's noticed, but when you walk through some hospitals, you definitely do see stop signs everywhere, like stop, wash your hands, stop, you can't go here. But we did kind of try and look around at our space and see, what kind of things could we do to make it more welcoming while still encouraging those same things. Like, yes, we want people to wash their hands, but how can we make that a little bit more friendly and less sort of, no, you can't do that. So the space is actually still in process. We're kind of spread out, but we have done some things in the waiting room to, take into account patients' feedback. So we do have, a place where people can leave suggestions, and there's also a nice board on that Neil made that also has like a quote of the day. So people tended to like that, so we continued on with it. We do have a number of initiatives that we believe have helped us engage patients in innovative ways. We know that living well with HIV isn't all about taking medications, and it also requires support with social determinants of health. We've designed services that will hopefully help patients be self-sufficient rather than creating dependency, and we don't want to work with patients, we want to work with patients as partners to attain their own goals. So I'll just kind of talk about some of the things that that we've been doing at the clinic, and I'll let each team member speak to the specific groups that they are involved in. So go to the next slide. Sorry, I wasn't clicking the slides. Okay. So first we'll talk about the community kitchen, and I'll hand it over to Jen Messina, our dietitian, to talk about how this has really helped to engage and empower patients in the clinic.
Thanks, Julie. Hi, everyone. My name is Jen Messina, and I'm the dietitian here at IDC. So one of the initiatives that we came up with about 2 years ago was a monthly community kitchen. So as a dietitian here in the clinic, I noticed, a lot of clients are struggling with things like food insecurity. They're not able to eat a balanced set of foods. They're having challenges preparing meals. And really, there's a disconnect between me talking about food and essentially eating food, which is, what we all love to do. So I brought the idea to our patient advisory group 2 years ago, a little over 2 years ago, and got some feedback from them as to, do you think this would be a good idea? And, how could this run that would be the most effective and efficient, but also really be a fun experience? Because so much of healthcare is about, like we said, like medication and all of these other things that, in terms of health, like when we talk about, what is health, most people will say, trying to eat as best they can as a part of good health. So got some great ideas from the group there. So we decided to do a monthly kitchen the Tuesday before check issue. Many of our clients are on disability or income assistance. And so the end of the month, which falls around the end of check issue, is quite lean in terms of funds and also in terms of food in the house. So we do a drop-in style group. Some come every month, and others come, once every few months, or maybe the one time only. And usually we have between 8 to 12 people coming. Lately, it's been actually like quite a bit more. Like we've been having some of our patients telling their friends, and so lately we've been having 14, 16. So we've become really popular in the last few months. And the beginning of the group, we always start with a roundtable discussion. We introduce ourselves, and all the participants brainstorm ideas for themes for upcoming groups. So it could be like our one for next week is going to be Thai. We've also done ideas like summer picnic, or we always do in June like a traditional Aboriginal type meal. So the participants come up with the themes, and they also suggest recipe ideas. So sometimes they'll bring me recipes, sometimes they'll email me, sometimes they'll bring them into the group. And so we use those recipes for our upcoming kitchen. We always talk about kind of our guidelines for recipes. We try to do things on a budget. We also try and include 3 out of the 4 food groups, and we always want to make sure that we have things like protein, which are really important for people living with HIV. So the other thing that we have, which is really great, is one of our participants makes a shopping list. So based on the recipes, he'll create a shopping list, and he goes shopping with either me or our social worker who facilitate the group and do all the shopping together. And then during the group, they all divide the tasks amongst themselves. So someone might be doing the onions, someone might be doing the fruit. So they divide up the tasks among themselves. And my role is really a facilitator. So I actually don't do any cooking, but I make sure that if there's somebody new that they, have a job to do, I ask them, is there anything in particular they may be interested in? Some people are more familiar with cooking than others. We have some people that are chefs, and they really help those that maybe have, I've had people that have said they've never sliced a tomato before. So they help, those that don't have, as much skills as, they share the knowledge amongst themselves. So they all take on different roles, and then they bring all of the food together. And then, we cook this meal together, and then at the end of it, we all sit down around a table and we have that. And, I've had some really great feedback. We do things like Christmas party and Thanksgiving, and some will tell me, that may be their only, Christmas party that they may attend. And so for them, like, it's kind of a tradition now that they, can come and participate, and all the supplies are provided. So all the food and all the, cooking stuff is provided. So they, know that if they come, they can, make a great meal together. And some of them have made some great friendships, and I hear them, inviting each other out. And so in terms of, socialization and making sure that people who are, want to participate in things have that access. The other thing which is really nice is when you're eating together, it really sparks a great, conversation about food. So they'll ask really interesting questions about things they've seen in the media, and among themselves they'll answer questions. So I'll really let them guide the discussion. And if there's something, that's a particular, if they have no idea, or if they're, kind of going off on the wrong direction, I'll kind of try and guide it back. But basically it's more of a discussion, and it's really a non-threatening environment around food. So we can talk about healthy eating, we can talk about, what is eating well, and really help to increase, people's skills with hands-on cooking. And I found that really effective in terms of translating kind of the science of nutrition to what does that mean on your plate. So I think from our feedback, we always do a little survey at the end. We've had really great responses. Majority of our clients would rate. We do a little survey, and we do a summary every 6 months. In the last 6 months, 96% of the participants rated the group 8 out of 10 or higher. And about 66% rated the group 10 out of 10. And we also have really great feedback in terms of meeting new people and making foods at home. So really consistently great reviews. And I think we'll continue to shape the kitchen, with feedback from the clients. One thing that they've actually said that they're interested in is creating a community garden so that we can grow some of our own herbs and spices. So that's something that I'm looking into. We're on the wait list for next spring for our local community garden. But it's just another way to kind of talk about health, talk about nutrition, but in a less clinical way. So that's kind of a little bit about my kitchen. If you do have any questions, please let me know. And I'll pass that back to Julie.
Thank you very much, Jen. Next, I just wanted Neil Fowler to talk a little about how we went from formal patient advisory group to drop-in patient advisory group, and why there was a need to have one of both.
Good morning, everyone. Can you hear me?
Yep.
Great. Hi, everyone. I'm Neil Fowler. I'm a program assistant in the IDC, and I've been involved in a lot of the patient engagement initiatives in our clinic and quality improvement initiatives in the clinic as well. And I also support Carol Kelman with the Aboriginal component of our program. So hopefully I'll be able to contribute to that discussion as well. So our patient advisory group really began in 2008. When it started, it was a more structured meeting. We had a catered meal. It was in a conference room with a set agenda, and we would meet quarterly. This group was really well received. We had lots of great feedback, input, and ideas from patients regarding the clinic and how we're doing, and ideas for change. But we found that after a couple of years, we wanted to gain a better cross-section of all of the patients of our clinic, because maybe we weren't really truly hearing from everyone. So what we decided we would do is maybe have a less structured version of the patient advisory group, and we now meet weekly in a room in the clinic, so we don't have to direct patients to find a random room somewhere in the hospital. We actually just remove a couple of tables in our conference room in the clinic and arrange the chairs in a circle, and we meet weekly on Thursday. And we chose Thursday, 1:30 to 3 p.m., because that's the time that really coincides with when a lot of our addiction patients are in the clinic, and it really gives them a more comfortable place to wait and have a meal while they're there. So it's less structured. We'll often just have a pot of soup or a stew in a slow cooker. We'll have fresh rolls, cookies, some fresh fruit and juice. And we really have no set agenda. So patients come in and they chat about whatever they want to chat about. So sometimes we'll talk about ideas that they have for the clinic, how we're doing, and some ideas that they might have for change. Sometimes we'll also pose a question to whoever comes into the room, like, what do you do for self-care? What does that look like for you? Last week, we decided we would pose the question, how do you control, how much control do you feel that you have in your own self-care? Do you see yourself as a partner or a participant? And one of the patients shared with me that they feel like a partner. They said that they've actually left other clinics because they felt they had no control or say in decisions about their health. We always have a social worker present in the group so they can address any psychosocial issues that might come up. And we've really found that having this low barrier approach has proven to be an effective engagement tool for some of our more marginalized patients who have maybe, and we've gotten some wonderful feedback from these patients that we just weren't getting before. And as Jen discussed, a lot of our patients have issues around food security, so it's great to be able to address that need in some small way as well. We've really found that just eating a meal together is such a simple thing, but it really encourages patients to open up and chat, and it's been very well received.
Well, we move on to the talking circle, and Carol Kelman's going to speak a little bit about this, and this is something that's new this year, and I guess maybe one of the questions that people are wondering about is, where does funding for food come from? And we actually, through the St. Paul's Hospital Foundation, have applied for a lot of Patient Care Enhancement Fund grants, which are just actually grants that are used for just that patient care enhancement. So it's things that you wouldn't normally be able to pay for within a budget. And so I think that there's other sources where we might be able to look to get these kind of things. And we're not talking about, super expensive food. It's very budget friendly, but we are able to provide things from that perspective without dipping into our operating budget. So I'll pass on to Carol Kelman next to speak about the talking circle.
Tante. Good morning, everyone. I'm saying hello to you in Cree, and I'd like to start out by acknowledging the beautiful unceded Coast Salish territory that we're so blessed to have St. Paul's Hospital on, and thank the Coast Salish people for keeping the lands and people strong. And today I'll be talking about our non-traditional talking or sharing circle that we have at St. Paul's Hospital. Approximately 2 years ago, we were able to get a funding budget to create an all-nations sacred space. And in that sacred space, we're able to perform traditional ceremonies such as pipe ceremonies, smudging, brushing off ceremonies, and we're able to hold large ceremonies for families. The traditional talking circle or sharing circle is a foundational part of First Nations pedagogy in actions, since it provides a model of education and activity that encourages dialogue, respect, and the co-creation of learning content and social discourse and a community healing space. When I spoke to the community originally around modalities that would be helpful for people for engagement, the elders in sort of a unanimous suggestion said that a talking circle would be the most respectful way to engage with our inner city community. And what we've found through the process is that people are able to talk about grief and loss. They're able to talk about induction onto antiretroviral therapy. They're able to talk about relationship difficulties, access to care, and they're able to do this in a place where they feel culturally safe and culturally respected. The talking circle itself is done in a circle. So we've actually designed the sacred space so that it has a circle of chairs and benches, so that everybody is seen as an equal in that circle. Only one person holding a sacred item like a rock or an eagle feather speaks until they're completely finished, and there's no crosstalk. We begin these sessions with a spiritual cleansing so that people can listen, hear, and speak in a good way. And it's just been, for me as a practitioner, amazing to see the complexity and depth of dialogue that happens during the course of these circles, and the support and community engagement and capacity building that occurs. In addition to that, we've had local elders that come in and provide traditional teachings. We have a traditional First Nations meal. I think tonight, what are we having tonight, Neil?
Tonight we're having shepherd's pie, but I'm hoping it's deer.
And we usually have bannock, fresh berries, and a teaching around the food, the land. And we've been also able to tap into some of our very psychiatrically fragile folks that are actually in-house and certified. And they've really benefited from having a greater community within the context of hospital. So we haven't been running the circles for over a year yet, but the feedback has been very, very good. We have at least 14 to 16 participants each time. We've been able to accommodate children, people on oxygen and on intravenous, and it really adds a wonderful in-house outreach to those First Nations, Inuit, and Métis people that might be in hospital or that might be seeking connection from within the community to the hospital. Thank you.
Thanks so much, Carol. And finally, I'm going to ask Glenn Bradford and Mary Petty to speak to the peer navigators and self-management, as well as just to mention the support group that's been going on for a long time. So that was one of our initial engagement groups.
Ask Glenn to start.
Glenn, do you want to start?
You go ahead, Mary.
Okay, sure. So Mary here, and I'll just mention briefly the support group. As Julie said, has been going on since we think the early 90s, and it was for HIV positive people, and it evolved over time and into what it is today. We're calling it a group for long-term survivors, a group about aging, and that just reflects the sort of composition of the group and how things have evolved. The important thing about what we're talking about here today is I think the facilitation of the group, it was kind of a conventionally facilitated by social workers group for many, many years. And a few years back, I'm really bad with time, Glenn can tell me, I said we needed another co-facilitator, and I said we need somebody who is living with HIV. And there are plenty of people around who are HIV positive who have facilitation skills, so let's draw on that. And we went to our community partners, BC PWA at the time, Positive Living BC, and my good fortune was to meet Glenn, who became the co-facilitator of this group. And since then, the history of peer navigators all kind of comes from that moment, but it was a really important time for us to see that as opening up, this hospital space to our community partners and to people who are HIV positive. And I think it's just really blossomed since then. Glenn, you want to talk about peers evolving from that?
Sure. So, hi everybody, I'm Glenn Bradford, and I'm the manager of the peer navigation program at Positive Living BC. So my program actually is housed in Positive Living, but we're contracted to work with the Center for Excellence and IDC, and we have an office in the IDC office, and we provide a peer-based experiential knowledge self-management program where we do accompaniments, we help people navigate the complex healthcare system, we provide emotional support and health education, and all the peer navigators are paid staff, and they are HIV positive themselves. Some of them are Hep C positive, and some of them are in recovery from addiction. So we really believe in the idea that there is a wealth of experiential knowledge out there from people who have been living with HIV for decades, and they've learned skills along the way. And so we basically harnessed those skills and said, why can't we turn this into a program and provide an opportunity for patients to actually talk to another positive person in a hospital setting? And that really came from, as Mary and Neil have said, from the long-term survivors group and from the patient advisory committee. That the peer navigation program, the idea of it grew out of that, and we developed it. Now, our good fortune is that Positive Living BC is a peer-based organization, so we have a long history of empowerment and volunteers helping peers, peer volunteers helping peers. So we were really sort of set beautifully to just take this to the next level and incorporate our work with the clinic. And we've been so fortunate that it has been such a successful relationship, and the patients absolutely love to be able to come in, have a conversation, a cup of tea or a coffee with their peer navigator, catch up on their week, some of their goals that they've been working on, go in, visit their doctor. Sometimes the navigator goes in with them, come out, and then debrief that experience and figure out how they're going to roll out what the patient planning is.
I would just like to comment, you know, there's not a cookie-cutter approach to this, and you're seeing what we're doing in the IDC where, you know, we're in this large urban area. Some of you may not be. We have resources, and this is how we're describing how things have evolved. Once you're committed to this principle of engaging patients and listening to patients and supporting self-management and these principles, that, you know, it's unique to your setting, and I think that opening the door is the important piece, and it starts even in the one-to-one relationship, really listening and acknowledging the patient as the leader in their own care, and then moving from there. So it's going to look different in different settings. The important thing is the commitment to the principle.
Thanks. So I guess at this point, we could open up to questions if there's any questions about the groups that we've just spoken about, and then I thought we'd ask we'd ask the group some questions, which I can either type or ask them, and then maybe people can type responses. But first, are there any questions?
Hi, Julie. It's Denise. Can you hear me?
Hi, yeah.
Hi. Great presentation. I just had a question around access and for community members being diagnosed out of the city and access to the support services. Could you speak to that a little bit?
Sure. So, I mean, we are a bit of a provincial program, given that we work very closely with the BC Centre. So we do have, you know, there are various ways that we try and support the province. One of those ways is, you know, for physicians through the REACH line, and then also for nursing, you know, we've committed to being able to ask questions colleague to colleague for nursing and social work at the IDC. I did speak to Glenn before this, and I think what we will do is send out to the collaborative, the IDC and phone number for the peer navigators, so that people that use the CFC and the IDC can continue to have that number. And Glenn has kindly offered to field any questions around peer navigation that would come from anyone in the province. And I think, you know, what we need to do is recognize that while, you know, in smaller communities there might be a lot more with confidentiality. Maybe you have two patients who are positive, and maybe the conversation starts with, you know, is there any interest in your part on creating a network in some way? And would that be a network that, you know, is a link to a group like Positive Living, where, you know, you could do email or phone support, or is it that you want a human connection and you would like to have sort of a peer buddy, for lack of a better term maybe, but I think that, we can support this in some ways, but I think there's also a lot of opportunity for people to look around in their community and see what's really going to work for them.
Great, thank you.
So maybe what I'll do is I'll ask the question, for the people that are in the conference, what are some of the small things that you think can be done to empower, engage, equip, and enable your patients?
So this is Christina. Just in response to Julie's question, please feel free to raise your hand if you'd like to speak up, and we can unmute you if you're connected by the computer. You can also unmute your telephone line to contribute, and of course use the chat box to log some of your contributions.
What could be done in even a short office visit that could help patients to understand that they're partners in their own care? So how could you approach a short office visit to empower or enable your patients? Thanks, Darren. Knowing what resources are available in the greater community when giving out a diagnosis is a hugely important thing. Something that, depending on where a person gets a diagnosis, it can really, give them a sense of comfort. There's a lot of resources, and there's others. I am going to be supported, or it can be very, people have such varying experiences with being diagnosed.
I take a stab at Julie's question about an office visit, because I think that, as I said earlier, that's a place to start our interactions with people, like from the beginning. The difference between asking an open-ended question like, what can work for you, or what's the best way to do this for you, instead of, I think in our conventional practices, sometimes we just march people in and tell them what to do or tell them how the service is. But starting in a more open way that acknowledges and welcomes them and welcomes their input can be a language thing that starts right from the beginning.
Hey, this is Christina. One of the early conversations I had with Julie was also building on what Mary mentioned. It starts from the very first interaction. So if you arrive and the MOA is friendly and welcoming, it's a totally different feel than if it's kind of, a closed-off atmosphere where you don't feel welcome. Things like that. Are there information on the walls that greet you when you arrive? Do you feel like you're an equal partner? Are you asked questions? Are you given options in your own care and treatment? I think those go a long way in making partnerships in care.
Could I jump in? It's Glenn here.
Please.
So I was really interested. I thought it was great that in the slides, the equip, enable, and engage piece, because what I have seen happen a lot with our members and what I've experienced myself as a patient is that quite often you'll go into your doctor's appointment and they'll say, you need to go on meds or you need to change your meds. What do you want to do? Well, if you're newly diagnosed or you haven't got a lot of knowledge around HIV and how antiretrovirals work, that's not really going to be a very patient-empowered question. I think that it's important that somebody in the system, in your community, sit down with that person and teach them the value of going on antiretrovirals. And it's not just about, these are going to save your life. It's because that's just a fear-based question. It's about, do you understand how the cell works and how the virus affects the cell and how the drugs affect replication. And it can be done in a really simple, clean way that doesn't have to be too science-focused. And when we do that, man, the light bulb that goes off in our patient's or our member's head is like, that's amazing. Nobody ever did that with me. Now I understand why am I waiting to go on meds. This makes a lot of sense. So just really appealing to patients and their ability to figure things out with a little bit of information can go a long way. And all that takes is a little bit of time and a piece of scrap paper to just draw it out for them. I mean, there's lots of stuff on YouTube, lots of videos on YouTube showing that kind of information. If someone would just take the time to educate the patients on what's happening in their bodies.
Can I add something as well? Can you hear me?
Yeah, go ahead.
I just wanted to mention that, I think when we first started introducing a more holistic approach to HIV care in our clinic, I think a lot of people were, we have this model in our head of what this should look like in the more conventional practices. But I think of, like with the Talking Circle in particular, I know that we've had patients come from quite a distance to attend their CFE specialist appointment, and then they plan it on the same day as the Talking Circle so that they can end the day with this wonderful experience where they also have a traditional smudging ceremony, and it's been very empowering. And I know that one patient shared with us that the circle really gives her strength and hope for the future. So to combine the more conventional approach with a more holistic approach seems like a natural progression, and I think it's something that we've been moving towards in our clinic for a while. So it's been refreshing to get the feedback directly from patients that it's having this wonderful positive effect.
This is Elena. Can you hear me?
Yes, go ahead, Elena.
Yeah, one of the examples that came up as from community when in talking about the experience of being connected, and I'm thinking that this might be valuable for people who are from outside the Lower Mainland to be aware of, is preparing the person and connecting them up with. I'm talking particularly about First Nations with Carol, so that people know that there will be somebody receiving them in a holistic way when they arrive for their appointment and guiding them through that, because knowing ahead of time, because if you're coming in from outside the Lower Mainland, just even walking to the hospital can be a fearsome and a barrier in itself, let alone that you have to overcome to get in through the doors, and knowing that there's going to be someone there to guide you along the way is certainly, we've heard some really excellent feedback about what a significant difference it made in terms of the person being able to engage in the very first initially, and then obviously to continue coming back.
Can I pick up on that?
Sure. Go ahead.
So this is one of the surprise things that came out of the peer navigation program being right in the clinic, is that we were getting phone calls from public health nurses or physicians or nurses saying, we're going to send somebody down there, can you receive them? And so that became a role for the peer navigators to, if necessary, go to the hotel in the neighborhood, pick up the person, bring them to the clinic, and just kind of hold on to them throughout the afternoon while they saw their various specialists and did all the care that they needed to get done for that day, because they had to go back the next day to their own communities. And what happens out of that is a relationship develops, so that even though they're separate, the peer navigators and the patient can phone each other and have conversations over the phone. We would like to be able to take that to the next level and actually provide Skype opportunities. But unfortunately, we can't do that out of IDC given the configuration it has right now. But at Positive Living, we would like to be able to do that. And so we're trying to figure out how we can set up Skype relationships with other communities And the feedback we get is that a lot of people either may not know how to use a computer or don't even have a computer. And I'm wondering if people in much, much more rural communities, if there's a public health nurse who has an office and a computer, they could sit with someone, arrange the Skype relationship with us, and sit with them and help them through that process. And that would actually build a bit of a relationship between the public health nurse or the clinical nurse and their patient and the peer navigators here in town. I'm open to that if people are interested in it.
So Glenn, this is Christina. While we're not hearing anything immediately from this pool of individuals, maybe what I might suggest is using the listserv to pose that question to, because I think it would be something that would be really well received.
Okay.
Yeah, Glenn, this is Ilana. Where I'm being silent because I'm trying to figure out how it would be workable, and in that the First Nations Health Authority has been a lot of energy into developing e-health capacity across the province in the various health centers. So it would be a community-by-community kind of situation. So if you have somebody that's seen, for example, and would like follow-up, it would be worthwhile connecting and finding out what the resources are in those specific communities, depending on where the person is from.
Uh-huh.
And one more add-on, this is Christina. I would know of a team in Fraser Health East that would probably be willing to test something like this. They're working with a few physicians there and looking at some of the lost to care clients and connecting with them, and that's a public health nurse sort of GP or dyad. So they might be a great starting point to connect with.
Thank you.
And I can certainly facilitate that. With just a few more minutes left, I kind of want to build on the question that Glenn had and ask all of the panelists, what are some of your ideas for how you take some of these programs, which are quite large, and deploy them in a lower resource or lower population setting? So what are some of the principles and ideas that you might be able to incorporate into your practice? So maybe if I'm not, so just to reframe the question with just a couple of minutes left, any ideas for what can be done in lower resource settings or lower density settings, rural, remote areas, where you can build on some of these ideas around equipping, engaging, enabling, and empowering patients to become active participants in their own care?
Christina, it's Julie.
Go ahead.
I just thought, we also have a clinic in the downtown east side, and we certainly don't have as much space or capacity there to do a lot of these things. But what we have done is sort of, work with what we have and created just a nice space for people to come and provide feedback. And it's a really nice way of engaging patients in their own care because you can sit down. Often in a more relaxed setting, I find that people do sometimes provide information or, give you a sense of what they are really looking to receive in terms of their care. You're sitting down and having a coffee with somebody rather than sitting in a clinical room sort of asking questions or asking a barrage of questions. So it's more creating some safe space just to have more discussion about health and healthcare rather than it always sort of being in a setting where you clearly have or it feels maybe like you have more power than the patient.
Mm-hmm.
Or maybe that feels different for the person.
This is Ilana. One of the huge challenges in rural remote areas is that walking into a building where that group is taking place is already feels hazardous for some. So just even going to a group where people know that that's what the topic of discussion is can be a barrier in itself. I'm not saying it shouldn't happen, but it certainly is something that takes a lot of thought about how something like that is organized in a small community.
One of the successes we've had with the talking circle around making it low barrier is that the general concept is wellness and empowerment and how you keep yourself well in the world rather than the over focus on having schizophrenia, having HIV, having hepatitis C, so that the positive focus of the group is around wellness activities, which are provided through ceremony, food, and discussions on how people are staying well.
Some ideas that I have are, because we run into that a lot, people who just don't want to cross the threshold. And so one of the things that we came up with was accompaniment. So a number of our peer navigators will accompany someone to a recovery group for the first time because they don't want to go alone, or they IDC has identified someone who wants to go to one of our groups at Positive Living, and so one of the peer navigators will meet up with them and go with them for the evening. And we've even gone so far as public health nurses or outreach workers have said, my patient really wants to go, but they don't want to go by themselves. Can I come with them? And absolutely, we want that to happen. So accompaniment has been actually quite a powerful tool that we made that up as we were going along, I have to say. That was really an accident we stumbled onto.
Well, I'd like to stop here with just a few minutes left and thank all of the members of the panel this morning. I think this was a really great conversation, and we will be tracking the conversation that occurred in the chat box and sharing that online, and also a recording of the teleconference will be available at stophivaids.ca. Thank you once again. Great conversation, great ideas. I just want to now draw your attention to a few of the updates coming down the pipeline on Monday, September 8th. So that already occurred, reporting deadline. So if you do still have a report to submit, we're happy to accept that still. Tuesday, October 7th is October's reporting deadline. October 14th will be our next teleconference. And of course, just a reminder about the upcoming learning session that's planned for Wednesday, October 22nd, and we should have details on where that's going to be held and all the time this week. So thank you once again, all of the speakers and all of the attendees who participated in the discussion. Have a really great day.
Thank you, everyone. Have a good day.
Bye. Bye.